Welcome to the chaos sector. Let's revisit something. One word, motive. It's almost been a year, and there is a man facing murder charges, yet there hasn't been a motive established. Throughout the media circus, the accusations, the narratives, the subconscious programming, a key component in this case has not been established. Accusations are not facts, they are not proof. There hasn't been anything that links Kohberger to those housemates, which would be a motive established. Funny how everyone else surrounding the housemates were cleared so fast, even one who was an ex-boyfriend. There is a possible motive there, you know. Did Kaylee's dad trust this ex-boyfriend? Not so sure about that. He apparently checked his body for injuries. Why would he check him, unless he had a suspicion that the ex-boyfriend was involved? He claimed to be asleep when Kaylee and Madison called him. But there was never confirmation about what those phone calls were about. Many in the media, and even the family of Kaylee, suggested what those phone calls were about. Didn't the family obtain those phone records? It wouldn't have hurt the investigation in telling the public what those phone calls were about, right? Kaylee's sister and father were digging through a lot of data. I'm going to assume those phone calls were not about getting back together. And this means it would hurt the investigation a lot. No surveillance footage was released, yet a vehicle was reported to be identified as a specific make and model. Heck, even the latest shooting in Maine had a motive. The guy was a military vet who heard voices, and we guess it told him to shoot people at a bowling alley. And to top it off, they even released footage of the suspect with a weapon inside the bowling alley. That's graphic footage shown to the public, which the authorities gave the green light for. At the time, the killer was on the loose. Why did they release that footage, despite the graphic imagery? Because it's about alerting the citizens of that danger. Now it's funny how this footage was released instantly, yet nothing in the Idaho murders case has been publicly released, almost close to a year now. We are not convinced this was due to, quote, compromising the investigation. Because the surveillance footage was acknowledged before, I repeat, before they identified Kohberger as the suspect. Meaning, whatever surveillance footage the authorities had in their possession, suspecting a white Hyundai Elantra of being linked to the murders, should have been publicly released. But it wasn't. And that alone proves there was a cover-up. Mind you, they stated the occupant, or occupants, of that vehicle may have critical information regarding the night of the murders. That wording is off to me. Why? Because they followed that vehicle's path in examining the surveillance. Apparently, they knew the vehicle made a right turn onto Valenta Drive, which leads to the highway. Okay, now we check the gas station surveillance. We view the vehicle make a right onto Troy Road, heading out of town. Let's check the highway cameras, because this could be our killer. They view the vehicle speeding down Highway 95, then onto Highway 8, heading towards Pullman. Idaho State Police check Highway 270, and bingo, the same white Hyundai Elantra is seen zipping down the highway. All of this footage would be seen, my friends. Kohberger would be essentially guilty here, even before he was identified, and also without the so-called DNA on the knife sheath. But none of this was ever released, even after the DNA was so-called discovered and matched. When asked if Kohberger was the killer, Moscow PD stated, quote, "We have our guy," unquote. So, since you have your guy, why hide the surveillance from the public? Don't you want the public to know that you have your guy? You can't claim you have your guy to the public, based on the alleged DNA on a knife sheath. Well, I guess they felt it was that easy. They didn't think the public needed actual visual proof Kohberger was the killer, just claim his DNA was found in the home, and the mainstream media will do the rest. Yet the more intriguing and curious questions were about viewing the surveillance. Authorities do not investigate in this manner, they release all visual evidence to the public. We don't criticize them for withholding information from the public as much, because that varies in relevance, or a link to the murders. They are not lawfully required to divulge all information to the public, as that is primarily for their investigation. But surveillance footage should be handed over to local news stations, and if it reaches national headlines, the same surveillance should be handed over to the mainstream news stations. You may wonder why waste time explaining this. Well, we have to stay focused on the oddities, as it leads to the truth. The Linda Lane surveillance was not, I repeat, was not, released by Moscow PD. The gas station surveillance is a screenshot of that surveillance. No surveillance from the front camera? Only a screenshot? The next door neighbor's camera? And not even showing a white vehicle? Why? The neighbor's camera would have spotted the alleged Koberger's vehicle, right? Why wasn't this surveillance released to the news? In normal circumstances, where a suspect is spotted in surveillance, that footage is quickly dumped out to the public. Even after the suspect is charged, meaning the investigation is essentially over, they continue releasing evidence out to the public. Don't give me that crap about, it's being held for trial. Bullshit, the suspect is already charged with murder, they believe they have their guy, so go ahead and show your proof to the public. But they didn't because they know there isn't any proof. And they used the trial as a way to cover for not, I repeat, not, having any evidence against the person charged. Do you know what this indicates? I'm pretty sure you do, but let's break it down. The reason there isn't any surveillance released from any of those key areas, including White Avenue near the gas station, is because Koberger was never there. You can't produce that so-called evidence, physically, because he was not physically there. If Koberger was physically there that night, trust me, they would have released the surveillance when he was arrested. The media would have been yapping about it, and the consensus, including the chaos sector, would agree that he is the killer, or at least, one of the killers. But, you can't squeeze truth out of lies. Ironic though, because lies reveal the truth. You understand? So you end up manufacturing as much so-called evidence as you can muster, without showing the greatest evidence in the case to the public. Once again, the gas station clerk claimed she didn't know which direction the vehicle headed. Now this was what News Nation's Brian Enton claimed. In the interview though, she claimed the vehicle turned on a side street, appearing to head out of town. Now Enton did mention this, but he also claimed the clerk didn't know which direction the vehicle headed. Confusion. And it's obvious why Enton tried to manipulate the public with this. We just went over this, but again. The clerk viewed the vehicle reach the intersection, make a right onto Troy Road, around 3:45 a.m. Now the obvious question here would be, where is this vehicle headed? One would assume its trajectory is heading towards Pullman. Now if this were Koberger, then the murders occurred before 4 a.m., right? But if this were the case, then Dylan couldn't possibly be awakened around 4 a.m., Kaylee, Madison, and Xana couldn't have been alive, right? Oh, but if we go with the earlier time of death, then this aligns with a lot of activity during that 3 a.m. hour. And there is no way possible a lone Koberger would be able to accomplish anything. Speaking of the Linda Lane surveillance, they tried to push the narrative that it was Koberger's vehicle spotted. But in their haste, they must have overlooked the fact that people actually examine things. Meaning, all of the screaming, yelling, certain names heard, was all revealed in that surveillance audio. This was throughout the surveillance, including the 3 a.m. hour. It was dead silent around 4 a.m. And you know why? Because that white vehicle spotted was an unmarked cruiser. The housemates were murdered, the neighborhood zipped their lips, and the unmarked cruiser crept into the neighborhood, conspiring. The black vehicle circling around Queen Road Apartments somehow has not gained any attention. If we go with the 3 a.m. hour time of death, then this vehicle is literally circling around during the murders. Again, the circling occurred from 3:30 a.m. to 4:07 a.m. It was never seen again. Now you see why Moscow PD never released this footage, too much suspicious activity, and devastating audio that indicates the murders occurred earlier than the 4 a.m. hour. There have been shootings that have been released to the media, body cam footage of cops and citizens, or suspects, having violent altercations, including fatal outcomes. As the reporters warn you, this video is graphic. But surveillance footage of an alleged killer driving in the victim's neighborhood is being kept secret? Let's focus on the screenshot from the neighbor's camera, because this is perhaps the most telling. If there is a screenshot, then there is surveillance footage. Whoever leaked the screenshot has viewed that surveillance footage, from the time the housemates left that home, all of the activity in the neighborhood, when the housemates returned, the activity surrounding that time frame, and when the murders occurred. Moscow PD has viewed this as well, and this is even closer to the victim's home. Again, concealing this surveillance. Because, the truth is there. And Taylor claims Koberger has no link to those housemates, basically saying the case should be thrown out. Koberger claims the DNA found in the home was not his DNA. Basically saying he was framed. The prosecution doesn't think 3 additional male DNA samples are relevant to the case, basically saying who cares if there were other males at the home. Moscow PD is hiding the surveillance from the public, keeping them from knowing the truth. Translation? Frame job. This is the chaos sector.